How did you get started in the puppeteering industry?
When I was a kid, I used to put on puppet shows for kids in the neighborhood, and I would charge them 25 cents to come in. And that, and my brother and I would also do haunted house in our garage, and we kind of set it up like a maze that you had to walk through from one end to the other. And the neighborhood challenge was whether you could make it to the end without, running through the curtains and leaving, because you would get so scared. So
you build all kind of monsters and things like that, and things that would
we did all kinds of things. Like, it all started with like a table setting of peeled grapes in red food coloring, which we told the kids were eyeballs. And that, and then we would dye spaghetti or pasta in different colors and tell them it was cat's guts and, all this stuff. And we'd say, go ahead, you can put your hand in it if you want, like things like that. So we did all kinds of crazy things. And then we had an old barrel, and we'd have somebody sitting inside the barrel, and then they would pop out wearing, some monster, outfit. And then years later, I was asked to do one for my kids' elementary school, and they gave me the stage, and I took down the stage curtains, or some of them, and I hung skeletons from the chains that pulled the curtains open and close. And that was the end, like they would go through, and I had, all the other parents helping me dressed up. But the very end was the chains rattling and the skeletons coming flying across the front of the stage. And very few kids lasted. They all they headed for the stage curtain, that went out to the front of the the gymnasium, and just ran down the steps and out. They were like, and it is funny because still to this day, when I see some of my children's classmates, they'll say, "You scared the hell out of me with those skeletons." The advantage of puppetry is the immediacy and the improv that comes into play in live, filmmaking. Whether you have a human on set or other puppets, it's the interaction between the puppeteers that makes it so lively. They had a big reunion of everybody who had worked on The Dark Crystal at Elstree Studio, and they invited also some of the people who had worked on the new series. And the guy who played the Skeksis, who was like the assassin, I can't remember his name. I just said to him, I never thought I would see a Skeksis move like that ever. The way it crawled, and the way they blended the digital computer controlled stuff with the actual actor and puppeteer. It was just stunning, really. Incredible stuff.
It was a beautiful show.
Gorgeous show.
Well, and also it's because green screen has advanced tremendously because of computers. You don't see that green haze anymore around anything. And so the puppeteers, having 4 or 5 puppeteers controlling one puppet and having it jump and leap and, bound and across the set, it's like, and you don't see the definition of the green screen. It's just phenomenal.
How did you get involved with the Henson Company? Did you have or did you?
When I was at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, Kermit Love, who designed Big Bird and Snuffleupagus, was teaching a class in puppetry there, and each semester I would try and get in, but it was preference was given to theater majors and seniors. So I finally got into class my last semester of my senior year, and I was just determined to outdo everybody else in the class, because I had always been, fascinated with puppetry. Mm-hmm. And I just, a lot of people were doing, the same thing with, they're using their hand as the mouth for the puppet. And the first puppet I ever made was a crab, where I put extensions on my 4 fingers. My thumbs became the eyes, and then I built this hard shell over the back of my 2 hands, and so it moved like a crab. And Kermit said to me, I really like the fact that you're not making a hand puppet with a mouth that opens and closes, but that you're thinking about your hands in a different way. Mm-hmm. And it's that thought process which got me, to work on Dark Crystal, because then I did a dragon where one hand was in the head and my other hand was in his tail, and my head was the hump in his back. So it went horizontally rather than straight forward and back. Mm-hmm. It went across my whole body, and I did the fly hand puppet, which became the basis of Sectaurs.
You briefly mentioned the hand puppet, the fly puppet, being the inspiration for Sectaurs. How did you get that ball rolling? I think I read somewhere years ago that you were at like a dinner party or something, and
I didn't like wearing masks at Halloween parties, because then you can't eat and you can't drink, and it's difficult to converse, So I just made this fly hand puppet to take to a Halloween party, and then I would just have it sit on people's shoulders, or I would take its proboscis and stick it in their drink, and people would go, that's disgusting. And it got more reaction than anybody's costume, because it actually, it just looked like this big, ugly, hairy fly.
Looking back, I mean, through the lens, they weren't a huge success on the toy aisle in 1985. What do you think that is? Like,
well, actually, they did quite well. The problem was not Sectaurs. The problem was Coleco. Initially, Coleco thought the price point, after we went out, that the price point was too high, so they brought out the second wave, which was just the figures with the smaller insects.
Okay.
But what happened was Coleco had invested all this money in doing Atom Computers, which was the first tabletop, and they knew nothing about building a tabletop computer, and they rushed it to the marketplace, and every single one, I think almost every single one was returned because it was defective.
Wow.
And they lost
so
much money. Here was a company that had like millions and millions of dollars from Cabbage Patch. And
I was about to say they were flush with money from
yes, and they lost everything. They went bankrupt. So the second year of Sectaurs never happened. That was the end of it. And it wasn't because of, Sectaurs not being viable. It was because they just blew it. And Maureen and I were both out in California working on the movie for Sectaurs. It was going to be a live action stop motion animation.
Really?
And
I've never heard of that before.
And what happened was we were 6 weeks into production, and they called us back to Connecticut, and they said, we can't go forward with it because the company is not doing well. And Maureen and I were like in a state of shock, like, how the hell could you not be doing well? It's like, it just was beyond comprehension that they could have, done so badly, but that was the reality. And Universal had agreed to put up half the budget for the movie.
Wow. So when you say stop motion, you mean
we had a budget of $20 million, and Universal agreed to put up 10, and Coleco couldn't put together the other 10. So
it was going to be a live action, but you said stop motion. So like,
yes, a combination, just like Harryhausen kind of thing. Right. But we were going to do large scale insects for the actors to ride, as well as stop motion insects, for the flying scenes and, whatever else we could, pull off. And
how cool would that have been?
Gene Warren, who did Gumby, was going to be doing the stop motion.
Wow.
And Larry Brody, who wrote the screenplay for Conan the Barbarian, was writing the script along with Maureen, working on the storyline. And
oh man,
yeah, we had some really great things. And then I was overseeing, the building of the creatures for both the stop motion animation as well as Maureen was, and also the large scale figures. When I finished working on Fraggle Rock, they took a lot of people who were on full-time staff and made us freelance. And that's when I had approached Jim about having a design studio at Muppets that would work on toy products. Because I said to him, we're doing things that are so much more interesting that could be translated for kids that would make really great toys than, the stuff that the toy companies are coming up with. And I always say that was the best kick in the pants I ever got, because Jim just looked at me and goes, Tim, it's a wonderful idea. I just don't want to do it. So they put a lot of us on freelance. And when I was put on freelance, that's when I started trying to sell toy product concepts to the toy companies. And the only one that would actually see me at that time was Hasbro, because I had worked on the Dark Crystal toys. But nobody else would see me.
The Dark Crystal toys that never got produced? Is that what you mean?
Yes, they were never produced. Because
it's a shame.
When Hasbro saw the movie, they said, this movie is terrifying. No kid is going to sit through this movie. Who are we selling toys to? Like back at that time, they did not at all realize that there was a large and dedicated, adult fan base for toy products and action figures. So
I realized there were kids like me that were that weren't Mary Sue's, that were watching, Terminator and
right. Well, I mean, when you think about it, even Star Wars, the figures didn't come till, I think, way after the movie was out. E.T., they didn't even have toy products that came out, during the movie. I think they were a year after the movie had been out.
You managed to get on board with Coleco, with Sectaurs.
Well, then basically, because a lot of the toy companies, they wouldn't see you if they didn't know who you were. Hasbro was the only one who knew who I was. I just got really frustrated, like knocking on all these doors, and they kept on saying, no, we don't see anything from outside inventors. We do everything in-house. And I was like going, okay. So I was at New York Toy Fair, and in the back of Playthings magazine was a small ad for Seven Towns acting as an agent for toy designers. And they had Seven Towns' big claim to fame at that time was that they had represented Erno Rubik with Rubik's Cube.
Okay.
So I called their office and I said to the guy, I have a bunch of toy designs that I would like to bring in to show you. And his first response was, well, we really don't see people from the outside. And I was going, well, then I just said to him, well, how do you actually get into this industry if nobody will ever see you? And he said, well, it's very difficult because the toy companies are very paranoid that you're going to be bringing them something that you've stolen or, lifted from somebody else, and then they get sued and they don't want, to be dealing with that. And I said, well, I have been working for the last 5 years for the Muppets. And then the Art Taylor was on the OC. He said, oh, well, that's a completely different story. He said, well, yes, of course you should come in. So that, that got me in the door. Maureen and I would go in and show Larry different toy ideas that we had. And he'd say, no, that's not going to work. This isn't going to work. They want new ideas, but it has to be something that they kind of know already, which is a really weird catch-22. They don't, it can't be too different, and it has to be similar, but different enough that they can see a reason to buy it and license it. With the new Boglins, I'm working with Mark Friedman, who headed Surge Licensing, that was instrumental in bringing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to the marketplace. So
yeah, he was a big part of that. I know
yes,
that.
Yeah. So it's very cool. It's going to be very interesting to see what we get away with this time around. Like a lot of ideas that I wanted to do with Boglins, way back then, that people would look at me and go, you want to do what? And now I don't have somebody, Chris Cavone, who heads Tri-Action Toys, worked with me at Melissa and Doug. And so far he's been great, because he said, Tim, you just go, throw things out there, throw them on the wall. Let's see what, we can do and get away with. The great thing for me is that kids today who are, their parents had them and they're getting them again, and their kids are playing with them, and their reaction to them is exactly the same as it was 30 years ago. The kids get it right away.
Yep.
There's something about having a monster puppet that's that flexible, that you can manipulate and control. And so therefore you don't have to be afraid of the monster, because you are the monster. And how many little boys have always wanted to be the monster?
Yep.
Absolutely. And little girls too. It's like, it always amazes me when I do toy shows, designer toy shows, the amount of women who come up to me and go, oh, Boglins. Oh, I had Boglins when I was a little girl. They were so cute. And I go, really? Boglins were cute? She said, yeah, they were cute, ugly. They were ugly cute. And I said, okay, and now a lot of women are buying them also, because they remember them so fondly, and it was so important to them. So
my brother had Boglins, like I said, growing up, and it was always such a nice, fresh take on, it's not just another stuffed animal.
Yes.
For a while it was like my pet monster and my buddy, and it was like, yeah, these are just branded stuffed animals, though. They don't, once you get them home, they're no different than your favorite teddy bear. Whereas when he brought that Boglin home, I'll never forget, it was like the mouth moves and the eyes are like moving and he's manipulating it. I mean, it was a different game at that point altogether. Yeah.
Well, it's a timeless concept. I mean, it's there's nothing 1987 about a monster in your hand that's not 2001 or 2021. Right. So it transfers seamlessly. And the ones behind me are vintage, and I mean, I've seen the new ones too, and they're just like them. And
yeah, they're very similar, but they're different in that the new rubber is a lot more flexible.
Okay.
And a lot more expressive. Like when you get your hand in it, the way that you can manipulate their face is even greater than the old Boglins.
Really?
The material is slightly thinner, but it's a lot more elastic. It has incredible stretch to it.
Did you are the new ones painted? Because
yes,
with all that elasticity, did you have to make a paint, or did you?
Well, it's an interesting thing because I knew that TPR was being used for other toy products and that there was a paint available for it. The application is usually pretty heavy, so it was a challenge for the factory to get something that they could spray on in a thinner coat that that would still be elastic.
You've got kids who always love puppets. Like, kids are always into puppets and monsters. And so that's going to have universal appeal for them. But for our generation, there's also a lot of wish fulfillment, because there were a lot of kids that I know of back then. They wanted Boglins, but either they didn't allocate that in their Christmas wish list, or their parents were just like, I don't know what that is, and so
there's a lot of people now who are buying them. And they told me, I mean, this what started this is I did a toy show in Parkersburg, West Virginia, the very first one I did. And the reaction, and I started making, small handmade Boglins, and the reaction I got there was incredible. And they said, oh, you should do this. Are you going to bring back the big ones? And I said, well, I'm trying to get a toy company to jump on board, but they haven't so far. So, I'm just making these small ones as kind of like collector series for people who still want them. And then when people found out that I was doing them again, they kept on saying, why don't you get them on the market again? Why don't you, like, guys, I'm trying, it's like, and they were saying, we want the big ones in the cages, it's like, and I kept on saying, yeah, I've been trying to do that for, quite a while now. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
So
would you say it's harder dealing with toy companies today as opposed to the 80s?
Well, I'm not, for the last 4 years, I have actively been going to Toy Fair and meeting with toy companies and showing them Boglins and showing the new ones that I was making. And, I had some interest, but nobody ever, said, okay, here's a contract. Let's do a deal. And, here's money, towards the advance against royalties. And, Chris, who I worked with at Melissa and Doug, had gone to Jazzwares, and he was trying to get Jazzwares to take it. They decided they didn't want to do it. And then, I don't know, sometime after that, Chris left Jazzwares, and he came to me and he said, Tim, I still want to do Boglins. He said, I'll front the money to get at least one made, and we'll go from there. And that's when I said to him, okay, well, he's all sales. And I said, you know what? Why don't we do a Kickstarter? Literally, he mistakenly launched it, I don't know, a day early, because he didn't understand how the setup for the launch was supposed to be timed or something like this. And it got launched by accident. And it got launched at, I think, a little after midnight, the day before it was supposed to. And we woke up the next morning and it had already funded. We set the goal of $25,000 to do it, just one Boglin. And we woke up the next morning and it had funded. And he calls me up. He goes, Tim, what the hell's going on? He said, I haven't even told anybody about this yet. How did they find out about it? I said, I don't know. But we had been saying we were going to do a Kickstarter. So obviously somebody found it. And then, like you said, in 3 days, we had funded the first 3, so we were just like, holy mackerel, this is amazing. So yeah, it's been an incredible experience. And so now we're we're in Japan, we're in Australia, we're all over Europe and the UK and Canada and the US, and we are looking to get into Mexico, I think, and Panama next. We'll see.
Did you have to secure the rights for Boglins away from Mattel, or?
No. See, back then, nowadays, when you sell a toy product, the toy company takes over the rights and wants it for, eternity. Back then, the rights were specifically just when they were producing the toy. So the rights reverted back to Maureen, myself, and Seven Towns right after Mattel stopped. And then Seven Towns took it and sold it to Ideal O'Sayers in Europe. And they produced it for like another 7-8 years.
Well, I can see how exciting this is for not just kids, but adults who were kids back then, because like you're talking about with the Halloween Boglins, there's only one on eBay right now, and it's going for just south of $2,000.
What?
And yeah, it's graded. It's still in its
what?
Yeah, it's an original Halloween Boglin going for $1,750.
Holy mackerel!
Yeah. So what I'm saying is,
I know.
Go ahead.
The European ones went for like 1,200 pounds a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people have this fandom for the Boglins property, but unfortunately, there's so much more interest than there is money in their bank account, because these things have become so valuable. And so
hey, don't play with that thing. Do you know how much that's worth?
so these
put it back on the shelf. Put it in a black plastic bag. Ultraviolet light is not good.
But you're bringing these.
You may want to retire someday.
You're bringing these back at the perfect time. I mean, it is literally like the Halley's Comet is coming back around right as everybody has a telescope.
I guess.
Yeah. So
I mean, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I mean, a lot of the guys are, saying, they'll say to me, you should have done this and you should have done that. I said, look, I really want these to be for kids today. I don't. It's great that you guys are collecting them, but if kids don't buy them, it's not going to go very far, because if it's only collectors buying them, then it's never going to have the funding to go the next step. In order for it to, it has to go mass merchandise, and it has to sell well, because the upfront cost of producing these things is so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
These are only available online right now. Is there any?
Yes, you can. Well, by July, they should be everywhere.
Oh, okay.
As far as pre-orders, but pre-orders now are starting May 1st with the current Boglins are being sold by GameStop, Toy NK, Big Bad Toy Store in the US, and that's all pre-orders.
Mm-hmm.
They just started shipping, and Walmart, and I'm trying to think who else. There's a few others, and then we haven't gotten all the retail partners yet for the Halloween ones, but we know like certain like Spencer's Gifts and Hot Topic, and those stores are doing Boglins now, and they want to go big on the Dark Lords. So it's going to be in a lot of places. And then the pre-orders right now, for people who want to jump on the bandwagon early, starting May 1st, it's Chris's own store, online store, which is for Tri-Action Toys, which is www.theboglins.com.